welcome to the Miraculous Lightworkers channel, your go-to place for all things about lightworkers and enlightenment. I'm glad you're joining me today. We're going to be covering a bit from chapter 2 of Russell Brand's Recovery, Freedom from Our Addictions. My intention with this is really to uncover the fact that a lot of people out there who should be in mission as light workers are stuck in addiction, and that's stopping them from their progress. So when I really asked spirit about this and pulled into my awareness, like, what do you want me to do to help light workers to get to where they need to be? The answer was there's a lot of people who are very confused and they need help to get out of the addictions that they have so that they can become clear channels. I love Russell Brand. He's really funny. He's gone through just such a journey, such a tremendously just gut wrenching journey. So this book here, Recovery, Freedom from Our Addictions, is kind of a companion to the other NA and AA books that are out there, which I'm going to share with you a couple of those. If you've never been into a meeting and you've never been invited into recovery, essentially, which is usually recovery doesn't, you don't get a clear invitation. Usually recovery happens because your life becomes completely unmanageable and you no longer have a choice. You're incapable of controlling the addictions sort of power over you in your life, right? So most people find themselves there not so much by choice as they know that there is no other way for them to get to where they need to be um, in order to have a life worth living. They find themselves at the end of the road. There's no more options. Recovery becomes the last choice to go forward. Um, so I'm just going to read you a little bit because I'm sure there's some sort of copyright thing if I just read straight from the book through the whole entire book. I'm sure Russell Brand, who has a tremendously successful empire and is helping so many addicts out there, which I'm really grateful to him. Spirit's really grateful to him for helping a lot of people out of a dark place, helping them to recover and understand that there is a really mapped out strategy, a mapped out plan for how to get out and stay out of that really dark place and have a life worth living, you know? So, chapter 2, he's so funny. Some of this stuff I can't even say the words, so I'm just going to show it to you because the way he's very cheeky, right? He's got this funny British humor that's not so PG sometimes. Okay, so chapter 2. Let's see, can we see it? Yeah, could you not be effed? Well, that's one way of putting it. That's not how the traditional program books put it. I like the way he approaches this, particularly because when you're going into a recovery program, your life has become so serious and so tremendously unmanageable that finding a way to pull into it where it doesn't feel so heavily confrontational, but much more, you know, addicts have a funny way of doing escapism through humor, anyways, because there's a lot of sorrow there, and humor often really just is a mask to that, you know? It's a way to pretend the pain ain't there. If I can laugh through it, then I'm capable of pretending that it doesn't hurt as bad as it does, because that's where the addiction really comes out, is I'm trying to cover some kind of uncomfortable hurt experience. And this is the only way I could figure out how to do it. And it's heard somebody call it at one point musical poisons. So if you have come to this and you haven't gone through musical poisons yet, you probably don't exactly understand how deep and heavy and hard this can be, and your journey into addiction probably isn't over, because you'll pick one thing and go to the next. You'll find one and you'll figure that eventually you can't get enough of that to sort of satiate the desire for escapism, and it'll just get deeper and heavier and more expensive, and you'll go from one thing to the next. And even coming out of hardcore addiction, Russell Brand was he was a heroin addict, an alcoholic. He was a misogynist. He had a lot of layers of the onion going on here. Um, Essentially, even when you come out of it, you're going to find something else. And a lot of people will say, well, I'm not addicted to anything. You know, if you're honest and you really look at your behavior, you'll find what you're addicted to. Whether it's shopping, a lot of people like to replace that when they can't do the drugs anymore. They just pull out their credit cards or whatever, and they find a way to ease the pain through monetary means. Or they're eating unhealthy foods and they eat too much. Um, I still have addictions that I can't break, it seems like, because I'll find a million excuses. That's how addicts are. I'm addicted to pleasing people. I want people around me to be happy, so I'll go out of my way and even to my own detriment to make others happy because it gives me a sense of self. But it's a cover for me, not taking the time to take care of myself properly, not doing enough self care. I'm addicted to my phone, electronics, and almost everyone I know has a phone on them all the time, or it's not more than a few feet away from them. And they don't spend a lot of time in nature. And it becomes a replacement. These electronics devices that are, pretty much taking over our lives. We have them on our actual person almost 24 hours a day. We're not very far from us because we don't want to lose our devices, because as soon as we can't find them, it's like you start shrieking, "Oh my gosh, I've lost it." It's worse than losing your keys these days to lose your phone, right? So, that said, we know, if we're honest with ourselves, us and basically everybody else around us has an addiction to something, right? So this step 2, is about asking yourself the question. In the original NA and AA books, it says, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So it's asking ourselves the question, is there a way out of this? When I find it uncomfortable enough, and I've sacrificed enough of the things that really give me true satisfactions, true joy, true peace, that's where, the goal is. We want those things. How do we figure out how to bring back authenticity? Because everything else is just a cover. It's just a mask. It's just a temporary sort of distraction from paying attention to what's real and true and what needs to be looked at. Unfortunately, the thing is, when we keep pushing those things back and pushing those things back over and over again, eventually they become such festering issues, like any addiction, that they have to be dealt with because we didn't manage ourselves. So this is really an admission that I'm not great at managing balance when it comes to certain things. Step 2 here, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. First of all, there's a humility in this, because a lot of people are going to say, wait a second, I'm sane. I don't want to admit that there's insanity in my life. But essentially, if you don't have peace without these things and you instantly go into a rage or a panic when you don't have them, and you're trying, to every extent that you can to make sure that those things are there, you have a problem. If you can't live without something external and the peace that is within you is not enough, then you have to be really honest with yourself and admit there's an issue here. There's an issue, and I should detox myself from it to be in connection with my own spirit. In the beginning here, it says, this step is about hope. We just admitted we have a problem and that our lives have become unmanageable. It's normal to expect that this kind of admission will come as a blow to the ego. It is our ego who, up until now, has been running the show. With a bit of help from whatever behavior or substance we've just been forced to accept as a problem. So, without going through, he talks a lot about his experience with what that was like for him and how he had to basically come to that place of humbleness within himself where he realized, I have a serious problem and I can't do this on my own. This is about not not in a way of self-berating, but saying, I know that if I'm left to my own devices and I do not reach out to anybody else at a human level, and really in a very honest and not a false way, in a really authentic way, if I don't come clean, I'll never get out of this. I need to have some way of being accountable. It's about accountability, right? So, and this one is accountability with God. It's not about really like connecting so much with other people yet at this point in the program. It's really about saying, left to my own devices, I'm going to destroy my own life. I need to have my connection to my source. So, let's move on to. There was only a couple places where I really wanted to read straight from the text. This is more about connecting with you guys and talking to you from my heart about what's going on here. So it says, you too may think, yes, I am an addict. I will change the way I drink or eat or think or relate to sexual partners, but surely the craving will find a new expression, like a magnetic field ordering iron filings. You can replace the filings, but the pull stays the same. So it doesn't matter what it is. He was a misogynist and he used women all the time for like decades, right? That was just sort of his modus operandi. That's how he was rolling. And that's how people knew him to be that way. That was his image, his sort of persona. Um, it can be a drink, a drug, a behavior. You're going to find something. With me, it's my electronics at this moment. I'm very attached to my world of electronics, which wouldn't be such an issue, except for I know that when it comes to a point where I can't lose my phone or I get really nervous and I'm like scrambling to find it, um, that's when you know you're going overboard. But I've healed a lot in myself too. I used to run meetings, and when you go into the meetings, there's a certain sense of service which comes from knowing that if I'm not connected and I'm not doing what spirit is asking me to, my higher power, I'm going to fall into these old ways. And this isn't like something where, some people can go through life and they have relatively few addictions. Some people, it's like they're addicted to Pepsi or they're addicted to cigarettes and they don't ever have a deeper problem than that. Some people, it will usually escalate though, and it becomes musical poisons. Even if I replace this one, I'm going to do it with that, right? So, and I mean, coffee, I'm addicted to coffee. And most people are like, well, that's not a real addiction. Well, I've overcome a lot. So when I speak to you, I'm coming to you from a place where I grew up in a drug culture and I was immersed in it. There was no gap. It was everywhere. It was all the time. It was available. It was it just saturated my whole existence growing up. And so for the first portion of my life, I learned to, adopt a lot of really negative behaviors. And so coming through the program myself, I can speak to you from experience. A lot of what I was doing before with these behaviors was because even though I believed in a power greater than myself before this, there was no connection. Sure, it exists somewhere out there. I'm not connected to it. It's not affecting me. Well, if you cover it up with so many things, you can't hear it. It's like sticking cotton right in your ears. And I struggle with how much I should really like reveal of my own experience, because this isn't about me, it's about you. But only one addict can really understand and know another and help and support another, because if you've never been through it, you will not understand how the experience truly feels. It won't make sense to you when somebody's coming to you from a place where they haven't been into addiction, and they don't understand how powerless you feel and how just completely all encompassing it becomes in your life, and it ruins everything. It most of the time it will go just one thing to another. What you accept into your life in a small way, which your gateway drugs, cigarettes, coffee. Some people start smoking weed. Some people start drinking. That can escalate, right? And those are just the substances. That's not even talking about your addiction to having your ego stroked. That's not even talking about, and that's like these compulsions, right? That's not even talking about the deeper things like my addiction to pleasing people. I replaced one with another, and one might seem like a healthier addiction than another, but it's all about balance. It's not like I shouldn't be there to help and take care of other people, but when it's to my own detriment or there's no reciprocity, you have to start asking those questions. Why am I accepting that behavior in my life, and how am I doing? There's even like codependence anonymous, coda, for people who are like so completely dependent on other people's acceptance and validation that they lose themselves in it. It's about an authentic journey to really excavating the truth that is in you. That's what I think recovery is really about. When you say recovery, what are you recovering? You're recovering your sense of dignity, your sense of um, being in touch with your own spirit and your own heart. Because the farther and deeper you get down that road of addiction, the less you are in touch with your reason for being here on the planet. The things that your heart and soul are here to guide you on. When you're talking about, like, coming to a place where I didn't just conceive of God as being something outside of myself, but connecting with God, that He put me on this planet for a purpose. This is where it comes down to the point why I'm really coming to anybody, and I know this is just a relatively sort of strange niche to try and speak to, but there's a lot of light workers out there who are just drowning themselves in alcohol because it's too hard to answer the call of spirit. They're, poisoning themselves with things that they know are toxins, disrespecting their bodies because it's too hard to be in mission, and they don't understand the basic principles of, you can't hide from God if you wanted to. He's watching what you're doing. And if you understood the true core of God's nature, which is, it takes a lot of years to get there, I think, for most people, you would never want to hide in the first place, because you understand the forgiveness that's there, that God's not there to judge you, right? So without like trying to give you my specific, sort of experience of spirituality, this is really about just coming to have less of just a dry belief that something out there exists, but a true knowing from the center of your spirit, from the activation of your light body where you start to go, oh my gosh, I've never been apart from it. Even when I thought I was alone, I've never been outside of it. There is no escaping it. And if I can come to understand the true nature of this source energy that invigorates this body, that puts the spark of life into me, connects little I to the big I, and makes us one and the same, like what Jesus said. He was talking about the Father and I are the same, which conceptually to most people they don't understand. I can't be the same as my daddy, my big dad, right? My Father in heaven. But I can be unified in my goal with him. Some people say mother or father God. Some people say both. When you get to that level of understanding source, you start to realize it is genderless. But for the purpose and intention of relating to him as we do on a human level, he is very paternal. And so I call him a he. But there is a maternal nature as well. But he doesn't, he's much more the father to me personally. When I think of what he's done on this planet with Mother Earth and using the fruitfulness of this field of potentiality, there had to be a place for him. He created it to put the seed of consciousness so that it could grow into fruition. It's a really complicated thing when you're deep into the drugs because you've gone so far off the rails to try and numb sort of what you think you see in the world. It's a really complicated thing. It seems like it is. It can happen in a holy instant just like that. It can be over. You go to break an addiction and never go back to it that fast, okay? But for most of us, we have this problem with overcomplicating things to, to the extreme. We complicate it for ourselves and we don't even realize we've done it to ourselves, that we can uncomplicate it too. It doesn't have to be that complicated. All it is in step 2 is a state of surrender, really. Okay, so, and I say this coming to you as, I'll briefly put it bite-sized synopsis of where my spirituality came from. Was not raised in the church. I have 4 nations of Native American background. 4 nations. All right, and that brought to me this. It's in the cellular memory of my body, of who that I am and where I have come from, to believe in a loving creator. Some of my nations call it Great Spirit. They understand, and it's not like this outside of us experience. Very personal, very connected. Much more than a lot of people who grow up in the church and they have all these concepts of what God is and is not. Ultimately, and I'm not judging anybody by that. I'm just saying my experience with it, and that's me today coming from a Christian background. And I can feel people reeling already when they hear that. There's a lot of pushback. You hear the name Jesus and it upsets you, a lot of people. But to me, he is my master. So it's a very complex journey that I've taken, and I'm trying to break it down to bite size. So coming from a spirituality of Native American background, which is mostly just really earth loving, but honoring the spirit in a really deep, strong way that I don't see that occur in a lot of other cultures. And it will always be a part of me, even though I have moved. It's like I never left any of that behind moving forward into accepting a master, put it that way, because there's a lot of chiefs and such that gave me a lot of wisdom. But when it came down to it in my spiritual journey, I eventually did come to Christ. Um, for a long time, I went to Unity Church. Unity Church is very all encompassing, and there's nobody who's not welcome there. All faiths come to worship the one creator, okay? No matter what they call him. Um, at that time, during part of that experience, I was practicing Buddhist. Okay. A lot of that comes from my husband's culture because he grew up in that, born into that culture. And from Buddha, I learned a lot about spirituality. He was so much an activated soul in mission, much like Christ. Um, there's some differences, clearly. Jesus is, to me, he tried to live that perfect life. And Buddha was, of his own admission, he was much more the prodigal son. He had went off and done things that were not so easy to redeem himself from to get to enlightenment. Um, I would not have come to Christ unless I had come through the Course in Miracles, which is, it accepts the life, the path, the mission of Christ in a much more whole way, directly from what Jesus taught, than you get from a lot of spiritual traditions, which are trying to preach the Old Testament and don't give a really clear understanding of how to live life as Christ would do. Christ is the most powerful entity that ever walked this planet. Him and Buddha were both real people that literally walked on this planet and tried to leave a legacy for us to get back. And I'm not discounting Buddhism by any means, but as my master, Christ will always reign supreme. He is my king, and I do believe that what he was trying to teach was so incredibly powerful. He couldn't even hand it to people in simple terminology because he was trying to get their minds to work, essentially. That's why they're like, his disciples are asking, why are you telling us all these things in parables and metaphors? Why don't you just tell us plainly? And he was basically saying, your mind's not ready for it. I want to, but even if I try to lay it on you in simple terminology, your mind can't grasp it. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that here we are 2,000 years later kind of trying to get the hang of it still, but it's highly fortunate that we have capacity for it now like our ancestors never did. There's access to resources to help us understand these things like our ancestors never could. Even in the last 100 years, literacy has taken off in such a way that enables us in a way that our ancestors never have been able to before. This is why I want to prepare people who are struggling with whatever kind of addiction it is. I want to support you however I can. I reach out to you and I extend my light to you that you may also reflect and mirror that back out in the world, because I'm calling it in and activated and in mission, because our understanding of our purpose on this planet is what's activating the ascension. It's knowing what you came for, remembering in a soul recognition way that is being the change that you want to see. It's activating everybody on the planet, slowly but surely, but it's an inside job, and it has to start with you. If you struggle in a painful way with addiction, everybody struggles alongside you. In my spirit, in my quietude, in my meditations, the awareness has come to me that if I don't do what I'm asked to do, everybody suffers because I withhold. That's a universal truth. You have a gift to give, and it is being asked of you, but to come into alignment with being able to release that gift into the world, you absolutely have to come to grasp the truth. Part of that, major part of that, is humility. Being able to release your ego up into the point where you realize, I didn't come here for my own gratification. I came here because I was sent here, and I've been given this, what Hawaiians call this kuleana, which is not just some, it's a privilege and a responsibility. I've been given the privilege to walk on this planet in this time. Oh my goodness, I'm going to get emotional here. I've been given the privilege to live this life at this now moment on this planet, as so many of my ancestors wished and prayed to be able to do. But you and I are the ones who are the answers to our ancestors' prayers, and we're having the opportunity that they didn't get, but prayed for vigilantly to keep the faith alive up into this moment where we could receive it. It is my great kuleana, my great privilege, and my great responsibility to respond to that and say, thank you, Creator, for this life, and that you kept me alive through all of the struggles up until this point. That you saw fit to bring me through so many trials so that I could be the gift that you want me to be to the world. That's not just me. That's a universal. I am so grateful, so ultimately grateful that I made it to this point, despite a lot of problems surrounding addiction that would love to have derailed me. I feel like I'm channeling in this energy right now where it's like I want to share that. I want to share it in a way that wakes it up in you, that you remember what you came for, that it's not all about you. And if you have been supported up to this point in your life on this journey with all these opportunities to learn and grow, how much of a gift you have inside of you. I really acknowledge that, and I pray for the magnification of that you acknowledge that you see that you're in touch with that, and you realize there's no darkness that can overcome you if you recognize that right there. That's where the power lies, okay? The power is within you. That's the activation of the light within your light body so that you don't stand in your way anymore. So that you can look at the world in front of you and realize the truth and the lie. Get really clear on the difference and move in that power. A lot of people that need you. A lot of people that need to hear your story. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and just cover one more thing from this book real quick before I close out this chapter. In the end, he gives some exercises to help you to move through the steps. He starts this one with a mantra. It says, "Limitless consciousness, source of all light and love. Please lay aside for me doubt and prejudice and give me willingness to believe that you can solve this problem too, the way you've solved other problems." Below that, there's a bullet point and it says, "What is my conception of a personal higher power? Describe it here. I feel that when I meditate, I connect to a creative and loving energy that is present in all life. They say all the energy that has ever been is still here now and will always be here. That means there's a totality and I am a part of it. When I have an opinion on suffering, it is only that, an opinion. I do not and cannot understand the full context of events that occur in an infinite and eternal universe. It's as if within my finite lifetime, a glimpse, a second of a 3 or 4 hour movie, and try to understand the entire plot. All I must do is engage with this idea. I will become open to the idea that my conceptions, beliefs, and experiences are limited. I will become open to new beliefs and new possibilities. I will become open to the idea that I can live a better, more loving, and useful life, even if I don't fully understand how I will do it or what it will be like. So I implore you, even with faith so small as a mustard seed, you can move mountains. It's really this concept, realizing that none of us has a full understanding of how massive this thing that we're calling a higher power is. We can barely get a glimpse of it, and I've been blessed enough to have a lot of time in that presence, so my conviction is strong. But a lot of people coming into recovery, their conviction isn't strong because the lies that are in the world are very powerful, it seems like, to them. And while they're busy validating that, it will continue to seem really powerful, right? Before I move on to anything else, I'm just gonna let you guys know this book is incredible. It's really good. I really implore you to get a copy. All the information about that will be in the description box. It's worthwhile. If you've never been in a program, if you've never been in a meeting, and a lot of people haven't, and they're concerned about what that's like, and they're not ready to, they don't want to jump into it, but they need to have some way to move through. There's so many resources available now. It's amazing. You can get apps for your phone from Narcotics Anonymous, from Alcoholics Anonymous, from all these different anonymity groups that are about recovery from whatever it is that's controlling your life. Do these things, seek it out, just Google it. I put the links in the description box too for where you can find your local NA and AA groups. Even if it's just a first step of just clicking on that information, maybe it's not you, maybe it's somebody you love who is deep into addiction and really needs that help to get that first step to move in the right direction. You can be the light for that person just by simply texting them a link, something so simple. Just drop it and say, came across this. I thought maybe you might like to look at it. It doesn't have to be confrontational, but I almost guarantee you and everybody that you know is going to be affected by addiction in such a deep way that it's going to disrupt somebody you love's life. Maybe it's not even visible. Some people are real good at hiding this stuff until they aren't anymore. Until it comes out and it's all out in the open and it's not so easy to hide. That's when you really lose control. But that's what this is about. How do I get out now? Okay, now that I'm stuck in a situation that feels like it's got its claws in me, how do I move forward? I'm going to share a couple other resources with you. This is for people who've never been in the program. Usually, you don't know what you're even headed for when you try to walk into a meeting. This is the NA book, It Works, How and Why. I would call this required reading. essentially. If you're getting into a program, you need to have this information. Okay? So, step 2, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Our surrender in the first step leaves us with a deep need to believe that we can recover. This surrender makes it possible for us to feel hope. By admitting our powerlessness, we open our minds to an entirely new idea, the possibility that something greater than ourselves might be powerful enough to relieve our obsession to use drugs, or whatever your poison of choice is. This is just the terminology here in this particular book, okay? This stuff is resources you can find online. If you want to read this, I highly recommend it, okay? But it's a very short chapter, and it's saying, look, you tried to rely on your willpower to get you through this. You were losing control. You need hope restored in your life, right? So this is how you get there. You have to turn it over. You have to get out of your own way, essentially, and say, I know I'm not going to be able to do this on my own. I'm at that point. The struggle is too great. Most people are just high functioning addicts. They just don't realize it. They have whatever it is that is their, drug of choice. And they stay where they think they're in control of it until they don't have access to it anymore. And then they find out real quick how much, it has its claws in them, right? So I'm going to read another, maybe I just skipped a little bit too far ahead here. Each one of us can believe in anything in which we want to believe. This is a spiritual program, not a religion. Individually, we cultivate our own beliefs about a power greater than we are. No matter what we understand this power to be, help is available to us all. The reason I'm reading that particular sentence, the last one I'm going to read from this particular book, is because a lot of people, including Russell Brand, he speaks about this in the beginning of his book, have a real problem with trying to get into recovery because they think that it's, they're going to be put onto a religious program. And for whatever reason, a lot of people have seen a lot of church corruption and things like this. And so it's really hard for them to believe because they're afraid to be associated with the source and, affiliated with those groups that they see as being really corrupt. It's not that they don't recognize the power of God and the existence, but they're afraid to come into that sort of union with identifying with the groups because they don't want to be considered to be like that, right? They don't want to be thought of as a corrupt person, essentially. Our corruption without God is incredible, though. I'm just going to put it that way. A lot of people have that they have the pushback feeling when they hear you say the word God because it means different things to different people. I'm talking about the one that made you that you can't separate from no matter how much you want to, and you might try to drown it or drug it to death, but it'll be there no matter what up into your last dying breath, right? It's part of you as much as you were a part of it. Most of us, when we think we're separated from it, that's when it all starts falling apart for us because we don't sense that connectedness. And that is painful. That is really painful. I spent a lot of years in that kind of pain. Here's another book I want to share with you. If you don't know these books, I just want to share them so you get your eyes on them and you realize what you're looking at. These are resources that can change your life if you're struggling with addiction of any kind, okay? Because the principles are fairly generic. You change a couple words out and you have the text for a different group, whether it's Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous or Codependence Anonymous or Alanon. It's all essentially the same text. with a little bit of a different flavor. Okay, so what I want to read to you from is chapter 6 of this book, The 12 Traditions of Narcotics Anonymous. The only part that I want to read from this is step number 2, okay? And it is, for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God, as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. So I just want that to be made really clear. It's not about pushing the agenda of any church or anything like that. It's about putting you in connection so that if you wanted to pursue something like that later on, the groundwork's already there because you recognize it anyways, right? It's not a foreign concept to you. It's very familiar in a family familiar kind of sense, like in your spirit. You recognize that you wouldn't be here on this planet without that particular energy having sustained you up to this moment. And that source energy must really want you here. Okay? So today is a really significant day for me for multiple reasons. It's November 11th. So we're on the 1111 frequency here. And I'm going to read to you, this is another one that's really important as a daily. It's called Just for Today. As a daily reading, when you get into the program, you need to be in meetings like pretty much every day. You know, when they say in your very first part of recovery, you're unstable as you're walking out of that old grip, that old frequency. Um, they say you need to do 90 in 90. You need to do 90 meetings in 90 days, more if you can help it, because you're going to be tempted to use some sort of substance or, some sort of behavior, which is there's a whole bunch of them that is going to throw you off again. It's just musical poisons, you know. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I'm going to read just the beginning. Okay? And it says it's from surrender to acceptance as the topic. And the opening affirmation here, the opening statement says, we surrender quietly and let the God of our understanding take care of us. So I think it's really important that when you're coming into it, nobody's forcing anything on you. And truth will flow into you in as much as you're ready for it and you're willing. That's a big word. In as much as your willingness will allow you to receive that that experience of what God really is. Because once you have that, it's so much more gratifying than any drug you could possibly try to get into your system. And in its own way, because it's sort of like it's releasing chemicals in your system sort of when you start to have that experience, the dopamine, the serotonin, all those things that are similar to what happens when you're deep in addiction and you get that chemical high. But this is natural. It's coming from inside of you, the thing that you didn't have access to tap into before. It's really an incredible experience. It's very, it can be really destabilizing because you start to realize that you didn't even know what you didn't know. And all of a sudden, you get swept into this place where you're like kind of in no man's land. Now I can't medicate to cover the uncomfortable feelings, and I just have to accept life on life's terms. That's a really intense experience. To just be willing to allow life to unfold and sit with it, even when it feels really destabilizing, when everything in you wants to fight it or flight it, run away, get away from this feeling. What is this? What's happening to me? And I assure you, when you start to activate, and most people on this planet right now, even if you don't consider yourself a light worker, you are a being of light. It's in your physical body. You're reflecting it, you're projecting it. Um, there's no way around it. It's coming through you. You receive light as a um, as an imperative for life. Even people who are blind still rely on light. They may have problems with their circadian rhythms and things, but this is part of us understanding when you look at things like circadian rhythms, how reliant we are on the light to regulate us. When you look at the actual physiology of a human being, how we have the cones and the rods in our eyes and in our pineal glands in our brains, it's because we are decoding light to help us function in the world. All of this is just, sort of background to kind of help you understand where it's all coming from. You are governed by a star that emits light. And if it wasn't for the sun being in the exact place it is in your universe, your life wouldn't have proceeded for one day. It had to be exactly where it is for our planet to even be able to function as a life-giving planet. None of the other planets in our solar system, observable, universe even, have a star that's in such perfect relation to the planet that we're on, that the light from that star is in perfect balance with the planet to sustain life. The light that comes from the star is what sustains us, and this is how we all end up being essentially stardust, is by virtue of that process. I know this stuff is like sort of like it's kind of far out there if you're coming into recovery to even start feeling and hearing these things, but you need to hear a certain concept like usually 3 times before it can get laid into your consciousness. What I'm telling you is that the light made your life possible. Great Spirit, Source is in the light. The light is what allows your life to function and continue. Even if you don't think of yourself as a light worker, the only reason you work at all is because of the light. In any arena. And it's to your great benefit if you learn to understand how the light is activated and ask Source about that, the source that gives you the light which sustains your life. Ask what that's all about. Even in the night, he gives us the beacon of the moon, which is reflected upon by the light of our sun, our most powerful, closest star, as a way to sort of keep us hopeful and to mark out seasons and things. All of these things are super important when you start to understand what it means to be a light being, that we depend on it, we're connected to it. I want to really convey as much as I can to anybody who's struggling with an addiction, no matter what that addiction, what form it takes. Your life on this planet has been sustained up to this moment despite tremendous, tremendous odds, which could have taken your life away. So this now moment is an incredible gift. What you do today matters more than you can even imagine. The light is a miracle. You are a miracle. I have started this channel as a miraculous light worker to translate what I know to the ones who are coming with me on this journey, to the ones who need guidance to the ones who are struggling, because I was asked to. Spirit never want to leave me alone about this. He said, look how many things I've given to you in your life, not just for you, not just for me, but because my brothers and my sisters need this for Spirit's sake, for the Great Spirit. He's trying to bring us into the fruition of our wholeness, to graduate us. Because the state we're in across most of this planet is really a state of sorrow, a state of wanting to be in escapism, a state of addiction to whatever form that takes. And we need to overcome it. We were made to overcome it. The power is within us to overcome it. We just don't believe that, most of us. We believe we're subject to this world in the state that it's in, and that we have no power over it, and that we're not being asked to do anything to affect that. I assure you that's not the case. None of those are true. You're in a world that is a vast field of potential, animated by light. And the light within you is so tremendously powerful, so tremendously great, that you have the ability to dispel darkness. That's incredible, Kuliana. That's incredibly special to be here now on this planet with access to what we have access to, that we even have the awareness is a miracle. Because most of humanity didn't have that. Okay, we're coming into a time now where the ascension is imperative. It was always imperative, but here we are and we're on the doorstep and it's happening. And we need to pull our brothers and sisters into the boat, the ones that are struggling. It's like, the parable where they say thieves don't break into empty houses. Addiction doesn't come for those who are useless. It comes for the ones that are shining the brightness. It comes to dampen it down with darkness, to create a denial of the truth, to witness to the darkness, to call God a liar. God is not a liar. And your conviction will be strong with that. The more that you witness the miracle that is pushing back the darkness with the light, it's incredible. And I can't even expound on it with words because it's experiential. When it gets pushed back to a certain degree that you start to take notice and you're just kind of taken aback, and you sort of, you come at it with an about face and you're like, oh my gosh, okay, whoo, mercy, okay, I believe because I can't deny it. It's in my face. The conviction is strong now because I'm witnessing it, and it's not a dry belief. It is a knowing, a deep, honest, grounded, undeniable knowing. Not what somebody else told me and tried to convince me of, but what I feel to be the absolute truth, because it's happening to me at such a deep level that I can't say that that is not occurring. A miracle is healing. A miracle is coming out of addiction and realizing that you are the light and that there's a lot of things in this world that would like to try and make you not believe that and cover it with lies. But the truth of who you are and what you are will come to the surface, given the opportunity. Give it the opportunity. So I'm going to close this by doing the serenity prayer, which is when you go into a meeting, they almost always will close with the serenity prayer. So I'm going to put it up here so you can screenshot it if you want to. Let's see. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. I thank you for joining me here on the Miraculous Lightworkers channel. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Be the change you wish to see. Join us next time as we all come together to uplift, enlighten, and ascend. Bye now.